And I would love now to hear your thoughts on day-year principle. On the Wikipedia article for the day-year principle, it says, I quote, Jon Paulien has defended the principle from a systematic theology perspective, not strictly from the Bible. So how do you argue for this principle through systematic theology?
Well, my first reaction when you shared that with me is I didn't know that.
Oh,
They
really?
quote me on Wikipedia, about year day principle. I haven't really published on that. And it was kind of like, what? How did they come up with that? You see? So I went this morning and I clicked on the source, and there was a 27-minute lecture by me that I did 15 years ago. Somebody recorded it, put it on the internet and Wikipedia. So, okay, I confess, I did say that. I recognize my voice, and anybody who wants to check it out, it's footnote 6 on the Wikipedia article on day year principle. You click on that link and you get that 27-minute lecture. I was like, real discovery, incredible. Okay, so basically, what the author of the article or authors, who knows with Wikipedia, it's usually fairly accurate, but not always. But in this case, it's right. Um, and it comes back to some of the issues we've talked about before. The Bible never states the year day principle. We're in the same place where we are sometimes with ordaining women. The Bible never states the year day principle. And what is the year day principle? It's that whenever in Bible prophecy you have time given in days, read it as years. Okay, that's the principle. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that. There's a couple of texts that talk about year day equivalents. Because you spent 40 days rebelling against me, you'll get 40 years in the wilderness, a year for a day. Because Israel rebelled for 40 years in the past, Ezekiel has to lie on his side for 40 days. Those are the two texts. Neither of them state a universal principle. Neither of them mention prophecy. In fact, one of them is actually after the fact. It's not a prophecy. It's saying because of that past history, you have to do this now. So the Bible nowhere exegetically says there's a year day principle. And I will note, I haven't completed this study, but when you look at all references to a year day principle in history, and there are hundreds of them, I haven't found a single place where a person came to the year day principle exegetically. Well, the Bible said this, therefore I've got to do that. It always came up when a certain number came into view in history. For example, around the time when Jesus came, Jews began to speculate on the year day principle because they recognized that in Daniel 9, if you take it on a year day principle, Daniel 9 brings you about to 30 AD. And so they started looking for the Messiah on the basis of a year day understanding of Daniel 9. But they weren't saying that when Daniel was written. They weren't saying that 100 years before. It was when, they said, oh, wait a minute. If we read Daniel as days for a year, that comes out to about now. Oh, maybe the Messiah is about to come, you see. Another one was the 1260. When you got to the 1200, the year 1200 something, there was a fellow named Joachim Fiore. And he began looking at that and says, it talks about these 1260 days. If you start with Jesus, year 1, perhaps the year 1260 will be the time when Jesus comes. You see how that worked? So people came to the year day principle not because the Bible compelled them to. If it had, they would have been talking about the year 1260 hundreds of years before. But nobody did that. So, at least that I'm aware of. So the year day principle was triggered when people came to a place where it would make the prophecy work in a way that it hadn't before. And I call that systematic theology, that the year-day principle is not driven by exegetical data in the biblical text, but by historical events and progressions that suddenly the prophecy makes more sense. And there are lots of prophecies in the Bible where you have this nation and that nation and that nation and that nation, and then you have 1260 days or 3.5 years, and then the end comes. The prophecy doesn't work, literally, because there's a huge gap between the last kingdom and the prophecy and the end. But on the year-day principle, suddenly the prophecy expands and starts making sense in history again. So that's the way in which Seventh-day Adventists, I think, and Christians throughout history have come to a year-day principle, is because it works in prophecy. It makes the prophecies make more sense when you see those on a year-day principle. So that's a systematic theology. It's God expanding our understanding of a biblical text because of the passage of time. And I would note that all the crucial texts that you use a year-day principle for are bizarre numbers. They're really, really weird numbers. Who would say, when someone asks, how old is your child? They would say, oh, 1260 days. Or 2300 evenings and mornings. No, it's 3.5 years old. Okay, 7 years old, whatever. Yeah, these are not normal numbers. Like 5 months or a day or 20 years or whatever. These are not normal numbers. And that's a signal that this number means more than a literal reading. And when you come to numbers like that in a prophetic context, apocalyptic prophecies particularly, that's where the year-day principle seems to be helpful. So that's hopefully explanatory of what the Wikipedia article accuses me of.
So, is there any support from outside the Bible, from ancient Near East context, or any historical text or inscription that use that principle, or is that Christian invention or anything?
Mm-hmm. Well, what you have in ancient times is not a year-day principle, but you have year-day thinking, year-day equivalency. For example, you have a 7-year cycle of farming. Every 7th year, you let the land lie fallow. Right, that makes sense to a farmer. Let the land restore its energy, etc. And people quickly associated that. They called it a sabbatical year, like the 7 days of the week and then Sabbath. You have the 7 years with a Sabbath year at the end. So that's a year-day equivalency. You do find that outside the Bible as well. King Hammurabi, who was the first king of Babylon that we know about, probably 1,200 years before Nebuchadnezzar, a long time before. So King Hammurabi, when he came to his 30th year as king, he called for a nationwide celebration to last 30 days, a day for each year of his reign. So they had a 30-day party to celebrate his 30 years of reigning. So year-day equivalency is pretty common in the ancient world. So God is using, God meets people where they are. And so in prophecy, he's using concepts that they would be familiar with. And so God plants the seed that as time progresses, the prophecy can expand to meet the new situation. That's how I understand it.
Thank you so much. And can you provide other requirements that must be met in order to apply the day-year principle so that it doesn't appear arbitrary? You said that if we see that number is not quite common or it's weird, that's one requirement. So what are others, or are they any?
Yeah,
Are there
bizarre numbers. I think also if the prophecy with the passage of time is too big to fit the period anymore. As I said, you have a series of beasts, in Daniel 7, and each of them reigns for anywhere from 100 to 750 years. Okay. And then the biggest, baddest one of all, the little horn, just reigns for 3.5 years. It just doesn't fit, you know. Reading it as year day, so okay, 1260 years. Yeah, now this character really fits. Now, people might not want to know that ahead of time because they would discourage them that the future is far, far off. If we knew today Jesus wasn't coming for 1,000 years, I think a lot of us would live differently. Maybe not wisely, but we probably would. So it isn't good for us to know sometimes the far future. But God predicted the far future in a way that made sense at that time, kept the future short in their perspective, but was able to be expanded to meet our needs today. So I think those are the two main criteria: bizarre numbers combined with a prophecy, a location in the prophecy where doing it as year day, the prophecy makes more sense.
right? So can we even view the numbers in the book of Revelation mathematically as precise numbers, considering that people in ancient times did not use numbers as strictly and they didn't have even good calendars? So should we look at this a bit more flexibly, symbolically, contextually, rather than literally as mathematical exercise? Because when you say 1,260 days, is that really precise, or is it flexible, a few years plus or minus? What do you say?
Yeah, well, I think it's an excellent point that numbers tend to be symbolic, especially in prophecy. For example, the relationship between the 3.5 years of Jesus' ministry and the 3.5 years of Bible prophecy kind of creates an equivalent that the church's experience will be modeled on Jesus' experience. So I think there's symbolic elements here. You don't want to rule that out. Number 7 tends to be the number of perfection. 3 tends to be the number of the Godhead. 4 tends to be the number of the world. 6 tends to be the number of falling short of perfection. 12 tends to be the number of the church. 3 times 4. These numbers do have symbolic value, but it's not a universal thing. Every time you see a number, you don't want to make a big symbol out of it in every case. So it requires some, discernment and study of the context. I would point out that apocalyptic tends to be more precise than general prophecy. Most prophecies in the Bible are general or classical prophecies, where a prophet is speaking about the future, the near future, in ways often that can be somewhat ambiguous, but looking forward to God's immediate action. Apocalyptic prophecy is long term. The prophet is seeing a huge thing. In classical prophecy, the end seems to be at hand. It's about to happen, you see. And so here's what's going to happen between now and the end. Obviously, thus far, those prophecies have proven to be conditional. Things weren't fulfilled in that short period of time. And so many of those prophecies can be reinterpreted later on by other prophets to extend the picture. But apocalyptic prophecies are more single-minded. It goes from the prophet's time to the end. And within that period, these times do seem to matter. So I would say my bias would be that as far as possible, we should take these numbers literally. They were not intended to be understood fully by the original generation. In fact, Daniel himself, is told some of these things are to be understood only at the end of time. So apocalyptic takes this huge approach. It tends to be a single line rather than multiple fulfillments. And in that context, I think your bias should be to take the numbers as they are seriously. If you can find a symbolic meaning for it, fine, but take them seriously is what I would recommend. And remember, Seventh-day Adventists' views of prophecy are grounded primarily in these apocalyptic prophecies, where there is more precision on some of these things.
All right, thank you so much. My last question is about this principle. Why Adventists are the only ones who hold to this principle? Is this a point of praise, as in how, let's say, wow, we are the only ones who have discovered the truth about this? Or does it make our position somewhat problematic? How is it even possible that scholars do not recognize it?
Yeah, well, having been involved in groups of scholars on Revelation, I think I can speak with some authority on that. I think a lot of what basically happened, and these are things you'll hear in non-Seventh-day Adventist conferences, scholars, wrestling with history and so on. The watershed was the Millerite movement. And what scholars noticed is that the year-day principle, the traditional way that Christians had read these prophecies, and by the way, Adventists are reading them like everybody else read them a couple hundred years ago. Okay? What happened is that most of the church abandoned that principle because of the failure of predictions based upon those prophecies. So when the Millerite movement said Jesus is going to return at 1844, that was a very positive thing for people living in 1840 to 1843. It created a lot of energy, spiritual energy. A lot of people were brought to Christ. Some good things happened there. But when they set a date for the second coming, they made the mistake that Jesus said, no one knows the day or the hour. You see, they overlooked that piece of it, that to be that specific about the future, to not be humble about the future, is going to cause more harm than good. And when the time passed, a lot of people just gave up on the whole way that people had read prophecies, and they shifted to Roman Catholic approaches. And I say that with all respect to fellow Christians, but Roman Catholics have never been happy about the traditional way of reading these prophecies because they suggested that the medieval church was not a good thing. Was actually working against God. I mean, that's, if you're a Roman Catholic, you probably don't want to draw that outcome if you can help it. And so Roman Catholics, during the Reformation, when Luther and others were pointing to the Middle Ages as a negative, they came up with preterism and futurism. Well, no, really. Revelation was all about the first century. It's just similar to Paul's letters and the Gospels. It's just dealing with those immediate situations, and then we can look at it now and get some benefit from it. Other Catholic scholars said, no, Revelation's all about the future. It hasn't happened yet. You see, the goal there was to keep people's eyes off of the historical reading, which didn't look so good for the position of the Roman Catholic Church within Christianity. What happened was, after the Millerite movement, Protestants kind of folded their tent and said, I guess we were wrong on all of that. I guess these prophecies aren't what we thought they were. And so scholars generally have abandoned it. And today the extra thing is, any prophecy that has something negative to say about a church institution is probably not going to be received favorably at a time when you don't criticize other religions. So the people I worked with and the Society of Biblical Literature, uh, some of them were strong believers, some of them were not. But we were able to work together because our common mission was to understand the text as it was given originally. And I learned many things about the text of Revelation from observations of those other scholars, including Catholic scholars. What many people don't realize is that in 1943, I think, the Pope gave Catholic scholars the freedom to study the Bible honestly and come up with any conclusion, whether or not it supports the church, as long as in the end they give their loyalty to the church. And so Catholic scholars are sometimes more faithful to the text than Protestants are, because Protestants are protecting certain doctrinal places that they want to be. So I have a couple of good friends. One of them was a teacher at Notre Dame, and the other one was at the Wheaton College, I think. And they are both good men, people I love very much. But interestingly enough, it was the fellow at Notre Dame that seems to be more honest with the text at times. You see, I love them both, and the fellow from Wheaton is a wonderful Christian man, and I find his writings very inspiring. But when my students did careful work in the Greek, they found that the Notre Dame scholar was more honest with the text at times. And that was a surprise to me and to them. So when you talk
So
about
can we hear
Catholic
the names
scholars
of
today,
those?
huh?
Yeah, I'm sorry for interrupting. Can we hear names from those scholars?
I'm not going to do that on a recording.
Oh, okay, okay, no problem.
Yeah, but these are friends of mine, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. I have learned from both of them a lot, and as I do my own commentary on Revelation, I want to know what each of them has to say. But it is the one at Notre Dame that has helped me more, is what I would say. Both have helped me, but has helped me more because when I do my careful study of the text, he seems to be reading the same things in a uh, more often than the other. We all have biases. I remember one time when it was pointed to me that I had a bias on a text. So people just say, "No, you're not reading the text right." And I looked down at my Greek text right in front of all these others, and it was saying exactly what was being told to me. I had missed it. My Adventist bias caused me to be blind to a certain phrase in the text. So you can learn from other people, even the people that disagree with you. In fact, you're more likely to learn from someone who disagrees with you because they've got fresh ideas. Someone who agrees with you, well, what are you going to learn from them? They already agree. So it's not easy road to wrestle with the scholars, but you learn something from that. If you avoid that whole world of scholarship, you may stay faithful to certain principles, but you miss the opportunity to learn and grow that you might have otherwise. So anyway, that might not be popular with everyone, but I have found that if you stay close to God, if you interact with people who are honest in heart, that disagree with you, you might learn something. You might learn a lot.